Okay. Yes. Right. Lovely.
Okay. Stretching done. Back is cracked. Ready to go.
Excellent. Lovely stuff. Okay. Okay, welcome to the Tokyo Jazz Joints podcast, episode 105 and number 6 on our Tokyo Jazz Joints top 10 countdown. James, can you hear coughing in the background? No?
I cannot.
Okay. To the Tokyo Jazz Joints top 10. Tokyo Jazz Joints top of the pops, top 10 countdown. How are
Not
you
bad.
today, James?
Not bad. I'm feeling very busy here. I was at my kid's high school.
Did you say number busy?
Yes, number busy. I'll explain why. Number busy. I'm very number busy. My brain, because went to a math TED talk at my kid's high school, done by all the different students, including my daughter, who talked about how math can describe what's happening with sound waves in music. So yeah, it was a pretty intense morning session. A lot of physics, a lot of formulas, a lot of stuff that came back after 30 years away from school. But the brain is feeling busy and active and ready to talk some jazz. How about you?
I'm glad they've let you back to schools again after the incident.
You know, you're going to ruin our podcast award chances. People don't understand that it's the Irish way to show love is to take the piss, as you would say, and constantly belittle someone. And people are going to actually believe that I've been banned from schools because of your attention to humor.
No, I know. Just for the record, James has never been banned from schools. And is allowed to go within the perimeter.
I was asked to leave a couple of my own schools, but it was for different reasons, which we won't
only when supervised. Okay. Yes, I'm good. Thanks. Busy. If you're listening to this in May, it will be already irrelevant. But I'm busy planning my trip, which is now confirmed for this year for May and June, and so we've been working on some schedules, maps. Checking out the usual sort of Jenga puzzle of where to go and when and how to best do it all. But so pretty excited. Actually, it's always the same kind of. It's always the same way, you know. You sort of it's vaguely in the background there. Oh, I have to book a flight. Then you book the flight. Then it's like, okay, now I have dates, and then it's about how do you maximize the time, make sure you see people and do everything else, but also get around a lot of new places that we have. Some new venues or some new joints to talk about and stuff on the podcast as well. So yeah, it's
looking so far like another huge load. I mean, I think it's up to about
typically
40
intense
so far. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to join every day of that trip because it's going to be a long one for you. But I'm going to take actually a few days off of from my day job at Acme Research and
numbers.
Yes, from a lot of number crunching at Acme. But there's a lot of places on the list I'm excited to get to. But before we do that, we've got to still go through we're starting to get into some really good places now. I think last week
we're getting to the business end, as they say. We're getting to the business end.
Last week's episode was a good one, and I have a feeling we've got some deep ones today as well. I believe I am leading off today. Is that correct?
Yeah, you crack on.
Okay, so we were talking a lot, a bunch of different places, way up north. You mentioned Sapporo, Jericho, and your previous choice was Asahikawa, both in Hokkaido. And I talked about Groovy in Sapporo, and Suga in Hirosaki, in Aomori. But we're going to go way opposite direction now for number 6. We're going to go down. Actually, my favorite part of the country to travel in, and it is the amazing island of Kyushu. And I have a feeling you're going to have a couple Kyushu joints coming up. I mean, there's a lot to pick from there. And I have a couple guesses on ones that you might pick, but I don't think this may be one of yours. We're going to go to the absolutely, just nothing you can say about it except that it's a lovely, lovely town of Nagasaki. and a place I've been happy to go 3 times now. We have talked about it because we've been separately, we've been together. This was a place that I first went to about 3.5 years ago. So it was during the COVID lockup. And I just immediately started texting you and sending you pictures and was like, you're coming here as soon as you fly back to Japan. It is Sarumanyan, the Sarumanyan bar. I don't know, when you look up Sarumanyan in Japanese, and people sometimes call it a kisa. I don't really think I would call it a jazz kisa, and it's certainly not open during the daytime anymore. Maybe it used to be. It's much more of a bar, but calling it a bar also gives it a... I mean, I wouldn't know how you would describe this place. It's barely functioning as a bar because it's so small. I mean, you really can only sit about 6 people in there, maybe 8 if you packed them in closely. You know, it opened in 1987 by the absolutely lovely Mizuguchi-san, who's now 81 years old, and he was one of those guys. You know, Philip, we've talked a lot over the course of this podcast series about our jazz kisa, you know, the masters and their relationship to the music and sometimes to the musicians. And Mizuguchi-san took it to a whole other level because as I sat down, I happened to be under this picture of Sonny Rollins. And he's like, oh, yeah, that's me. And, you know, I played with him. And I was like, wait, what? Like, that was literally the first thing he said. And so we immediately just dove right in. I don't even think the time that I visited, I explained what I was doing. He was just like, oh, you speak Japanese? Great. And so I asked him a cajillion questions. And yeah, it turns out that he's a sax player. He's been playing pretty much his whole life. He opened the joint in 1987, so it's almost 40 years now. And he was able to not only play with Sonny Rollins on one of Sonny's frequent Kyushu tours, and we've mentioned that too. Sonny Rollins really loved Kyushu, went there a lot, and you see a lot of pictures of him everywhere, but actually became kind of friendly with him. And so sitting there and hearing that story and then looking around this extremely small, cluttered bar, and the kicker is that, you know, he's playing some record and he's just like, oh, yeah, you know, I played with him. Obviously, I was really nervous because how could you play with Sonny Rollins? It's impossible. And I was like, well, I'm sure you were fine. He's like, well, let me play it for you. And he just immediately put the CD on. It's like he had it waiting on the bar so he could tell the story. You know what I mean? And hey, no, I'm not going to criticize that. If I played with Sonny in my life and I was a musician, I would tell every single person that came in every time, you know, I played with Sonny Rollins. So it was one of those experiences where the guy himself, Mizuguchi-san, who was a real funky dude. I don't know if you remember him with his hat, his long beard, his cool hair, his cool clothing, super friendly, great musician. And his bar is just completely unique. It doesn't look like any other jazz bar we've been in. It's small and cluttered to a degree you can barely move. And I don't think he really cares. He doesn't seem to have a lot of customers. He's got a place with pretty cheap rent. And he just has it as a place to hang out. The one other customer I met when I was there the first time was a postman who said that, oh, yeah, he comes here after dropping off the mail when he finishes his shift at 6 p.m. because it's the only place that he enjoys drinking. And I was just like, that's fantastic. I would do exactly the same thing. So Sarumanyan for me, I mean, the 2 nights I was the first night alone and then the night with you when we went back a couple years after are just burned into my memory. And it's the kind of place that if I lived locally, I don't think I would ever drink anywhere else.
Yeah, nice choice. Yeah, I mean, I as you said, we went together, and I think if you remember, we were kind of tortured a little bit for a day, like basically a full day, because we couldn't quite grasp whether or not it was open. And one of the reasons for the confusion was there's a huge there's like a huge sign, backlit sign that just says jazz on it, all covered in kind of like silver, like the edge is all covered in like silver, like tinfoil paper, or just tinfoil, and it's kind of attached with like cable ties to a lamppost, so it's kind of permanently out in the street. And we'd seen this and we're like, is it open? And we couldn't. I think we went up the stairs a couple of times. I mean, generally speaking, as a sort of a rule of thumb, if the light's not on, you know, in Japan, generally the place is not open, but it just had that feel of being open. And then we were like, oh God, what if we don't get there? And I think actually when you and I went together, then he did tell us that he'd not been that well recently. So I think he'd shortened his opening hours, or they just weren't on as he just wasn't opening in the same regular fashion. But like you said, what an amazing place. I mean, it was just like this kind of, it just had that feel. It was like a kid's, it was like a toy shop, you know? You just went in, there was just like all these little things like sitting everywhere, little trinkets and like bits of memorabilia and like photographs and signed photographs. And I mean, you're sort of playing it down a bit with the Sonny Rollins thing, because I'm just going back through my photographs there. And the mad thing is that with a lot of these guys, you know, it's not just that. I mean, there's also a photograph of him just with hanging out with Joe Henderson at the Blue Note, the Blue Note as well. So, you know, like it's like, well, I'm friends with I'm friends with Sonny Rollins, but yeah, you know, Joe Henderson and I, you know, we used to hang out too. Like, so it's just testament again, and we've said this so many times, it's just testament to how connected these guys were in an era too where, you know, connectivity and communication just wasn't, you know, we even remember going the late 90s where you still had to make international calls through KDDI. You had to put you know, coins into an international payphone, which was a different color to the domestic payphones. And so, but, you know, this is, you know, back in the 80s or, you know, early 90s, and they're in touch with these legendary musicians. They're hanging out with them. And you just think, like, it's just an incredible... It's an incredible thing to think, you know?
And it sort of hits on for me, like in both directions there, because it shows the amazing deep love yet again that fans in Japan have for jazz. I've said it so many times that, you know, jazz was born in America, but truly, like, Japan is heaven for jazz fans, because this the amount of places we've been on, clubs, etc. You know, you can hear it everywhere. The love for it is almost unparalleled. But the opposite direction too. Like, one of the photos that he has up on the wall with Sonny is signed by Sonny, and it says, "For my good friend in Japan." And it's the two of them standing there, and then they've got their saxophone reeds hanging around their neck, and Sonny is wearing a T-shirt of himself, of the famous Sonny Rollins Samurai poster, right? And you just understand, it's like for musicians who, especially musicians of that generation in the US, for Black American musicians who had to fight through so much just to create their art, to come over here and be treated with the respect that they deserve, to be treated as great artists, as great humans, you know, and given the kind of love that very often they didn't get at home. It was a very reciprocal type of relationship. We've seen that with a lot, and we're going to get into that more later episodes too, where, you know, American musicians who came here and found a second home, you know, with their Japanese fans, whether it was collaborating, sometimes even getting married. And so having that vibe, and, you know, again, to remind people, Nagasaki of unfortunately is world famous for its, you know, for its worst possible reason. There's so much more there, though. It's a city of great history. And we actually talked about that. I've got in the notes. I forgot. I talked with Mizuguchi-san about that, because eventually I told him what I was doing, going around Kyushu, going to all these jazz spots. And he was like, "Oh, you're not going to the Atomic Museum?" And I said, you know, frankly, no, because first of all, it would be pretty difficult to do that, just come out and be like, right, okay, what's my next stop on the tourist trail of jazz? But you know what I mean? It's such an overwhelming experience. I had been to the Hiroshima one. And secondly, like, I don't want to associate this city only because of the worst possible reasons. And he really got emotional. And he was like, you know, "I'm so happy to hear you say that, because, you know, I love my city and I love our region. And I don't want us to be known around the world just because of that. You know, we have so much here. We've got the history of the Chinatown, of the Dutch, who had their trading port in Nagasaki. You've got all of the old churches, you know, because it was a center of Japanese Christianity. And of course, you've got the great jazz scene as well." So he was saying that, like, he really loves when people come into his bar and he can sort of like explain to them about, there's a lot more in our city here. And Philip, I've got to go back. You mentioned the sign, the one you with the little silver on it. But what I was thinking about was the sign right out on the road. That's just black and white. That's not the one you were referring to, right? Because I have
it is. Yeah,
here.
that's the one.
Oh, because I've got a picture of that here. I don't, for whatever reason, it just looks plain black and white. I'm not seeing anything else around the edge of it. But
I have one that's lit up, so maybe he lights that up separately. So maybe we saw that or at a different time. Or is your photograph at night?
It was looks like it's in the afternoon. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've one at
Yeah.
night where they're both, or maybe it was the night that we did get in and they're both lit up or whatever
That
it was.
makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, it's incredible
going
because
back
that
to,
big
like,
one,
the-
it just says jazz. It's all it says is jazz, and you're just like,
It says jazz. Yeah,
you come
it's
up that
like,
kind of
I mean,
tree-lined, very pretty street.
Yeah.
It's not like ones you often see in Japan. It has trees, little cobblestoney at places, and then you just see this in the distance. You see jazz. It's almost as if like like for us, like you're in a dream state. It's like, wait, what? Is this a trap?
No,
it's
I
like
know.
let's get the foreign guys.
Mission, right? It's just jazz.
Yeah.
It's a statement of intent, but
Beautiful.
going back to the samurai thing, actually, I just found something really interesting. I don't know if I have a proper photograph of it. I'll just send it to you. But it's actually just going back to the samurai thing. And I've only noticed this now just going through. But if you just look at the photo, it's actually, I'm guessing, the same guy that did the poster image, but it's actually a full body Sonny Rollins as a samurai with a saxophone instead of a sword. And it's a framed picture. The artist,
gosh.
it says
That's
Mio.
amazing.
Is it Miyosaki?
That's amazing.
Or maybe that's. Oh no, sorry, that's Miyazaki. So it's actually Miyazaki as
Yes,
in
yes.
the city.
Yes.
So I don't know, like the provenance of that there, but that is an unbelievable.
Oh, that is ridiculous.
I mean,
We've got to get that up on.
what?
We got to get that up on social media. That is absolutely insane. I did not remember this. Holy shit!
It's
look
crazy,
it's
right?
like, and he's folded into the kimono. He's folded into the kimono, the American flag, which is just wow. This is
incredible, right?
Yeah, that is unbelievable. Well, like you were saying in Saramani, because it's small, but it's very cramped. There's so many little things around, and it's dark. He keeps it really, really dark. So I don't think I noticed even a third of all the things that were up on the wall, because like you mentioned, there's some concert posters. There's the Joe Henderson one I forgot about. There's a bunch of signed albums that sort of be like hidden behind the bar as well. And so, this, it just would pay to go back there and spend like an hour just with him looking through everything.
I mean, he was an interesting guy too, because he didn't like, he's one of those guys that he's not the kind of the stereotypical kind of humble owner. Actually, he's quite proud of all the stuff that he's done. And I remember he was also playing his own CD, if you remember, him playing. So he put that on. There's a brilliant photograph too of a bottle, a branded bottle of Kentucky bourbon, which just says Jazz Club. It's got a picture of him playing on the label. So like he was just very, very proud of his achievements and very proud of his connections. And so he should be. I mean, it's kind of wild, but yeah, like you say, that photograph, just looking at him, I'll just send you this one. Looking at him with the picture of Sonny Rollins on the T-shirt is just brilliant, because he wore that little sort of beret as well.
Yes, he was a
But
dandy.
I remember
He's a real dandy.
having a kind of a bit of a slight sense, I think, of melancholy about the place. I don't know if you remember, but he was asking, he remembered your name, but he was asking our names, and he was doing this thing which is very noticeable, I think, with older people in particular, where memory is becoming an issue, where he was writing everything down. So,
Yes.
he would sort of
Yes,
say, well,
that's
what's
right.
your name? And I would say, oh,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
O'Neill. And he would like write it down with this little pencil on a piece of paper.
He
And,
was quite
you got the
intrigued.
sense he's an old man.
I remember he was quite intrigued as well, because you told him, in Japanese, kita airando. And I think he repeated it like 2 or 3 times to sort of be like,
Right.
wait, where's that? Is that different to regular? And it took him a second to try maybe to remember his geography. Like, oh yes, right. Okay, I got you. But yeah, you're right. He was writing that down. Philip, I completely was emotional that he remembered me. I couldn't believe it. And I think he even said something that was like, oh yeah, because your last name's kind of, he didn't say weird, but he's just like, your last name is unusual, and it was like, that's why I remembered it. It wasn't like James Smith's or something, but yeah, he was
Do
a
you
great
remember? Do you remember what preceded the trip to Saramanian? Directly preceded the trip to Saramanian.
Yeah, it was of course, it was the absolutely stupendous lemon ramen.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah,
I wouldn't remember that. Well, I wouldn't remember it in that order. I really struggle with the order of like what year it was we were there and what day it was
right,
and everything
right,
else. But looking at the camera roll, yeah, massive bowl of lemon ramen.
Well,
which,
clearly,
as we've said before,
clearly I
was a revelation.
spent way more time today actually going through my notes and previous bits of information. Because I remembered everything in order. But
I've only been
yes.
up for an hour, so I mean.
Well, here I have okay, but I have one last quiz for you then about Saramanian. As we were getting ready to leave, what did we see on the bathroom door?
Oh,
You
The
must
one
have
and
got a
only.
picture. Come on, the one and
I
only.
think we'll just leave it. I think we'll just leave it hanging. Answers on a postcard. The most.
Want to make that a quiz? We could give some goods. You have like, do you have any like stickers or postcards? Something we could give to someone who can guess.
Yeah, I've got some merch. So if you DM Tokyo Jazz Joints on Instagram with what you think we saw just as we left, I'll give you one clue. It's the most aggressive. One of the most aggressive jazz signatories or signers that we've encountered in the Jazz Kisa world.
That should make it easy for regular listeners. Yes, on the bathroom
Left his
door.
mark.
On the bathroom door, and way bigger than anybody else's. Yeah. So, and I mean, yet again, like this guy was here. This guy was also in ceremony.
Well, that's it, right? Of course, you sort of forget,
yeah.
right? But also, also just
crazy.
there in that tiny little place,
just knocking back sake until 2 a.m, and it's just, man, those were the days. Imagine, like, if you were Philip. We said that before. Imagine we were living in Japan in the 70s, and we're jazz fans. And you just walk into your local jazz place, and it's like, oh yeah, hey, this is Sir Roland Hanna's here. He likes Japanese sake. Do you want something? You'd be like, wait, what? Like, what are you doing here? In the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's just amazing. And yes, I knew it was tough. Like I said, Kyushu, full of great jazz. I mean, we've got so many good stories there. It was real tough, but I just had to include it because I think it's definitely one of my all-time favorites.
Well, there's two. Just looking at the picture you talked about earlier, I don't think you mentioned this, but Sonny Rollins not only signed it, but he's also written "Stay Genki," and certainly we hope that they both stay Genki for
sure.
A few more years. But
sure.
that's Saramanian. So that's your number 6.
Yes.
And for me, number 6, I've done a slight little bit of a reshuffle, but I think I've got the order right now, and I hope I can stand by this. But for me, number 6 would be we're staying down in Kyushu actually, and I think for me, and I don't know if you remember, but there's been 1 or 2 times where we have this list, and then me being me, I'm just like, hang on, is there also, just make sure that there's not somewhere else. And I think this was one of these places where I was like, look, this a bit like Naima, where it's like you can't sort of ignore this name. Now, it wasn't the name so much that did it this time. It was more the proximity, and sort of looking. I just have this vague memory of looking kind of at a photograph online in Google Maps or whatever, and thinking, oh, I don't know. But we for whatever reason, it was quite close. So we went to it anyway. So we're in Fukuoka, and we just took a very short train out to kind of suburban area and walked up past a school and up these streets. And you're thinking, is there really somewhere up here? And I mean, again, it's a stupid thing to think because we know how often you turn a corner and just find these incredible places. And this was one of those examples. So we walked up this tiny suburban street, we turned this corner, and lo and behold, there's this enormous kind of red painted wall, which just said Adams Coffee and Jazz. And it was like, wow, okay, so that was worth coming for. And that was before we even got inside. And we've talked about this at length on another episode, but my memory of it, at least, is that we went in and there was sort of, it was a little bit, I mean, I may be over egging this, but it was a little bit like in sort of Western films where everyone's in a bar, in a saloon, and then you kind of, someone opens those swinging doors and the place goes silent. Now, it wasn't quite that busy or aggressive, but we walked in.
That's exactly what it feels like. Yes,
I remember distinctly. There was 3 older customers at the bar. So we've talked about this again if you want to listen to more. But I mean, when you go in, there's this huge wooden counter bar area, and then there's to the right, there's just this massive sofa and a kind of an open space that faces the speakers and the TV. And there were 3 older customers at the bar, and they basically, one of them said as we came in, Mayota kana, and which means obviously, are they lost? And we obviously understood that, so we said, oh no, we're not lost. We've come to see Adams or whatever. And then, of course, he kind of ushered us onto the sofa. So at this point, we're sat on this massive leather sofa facing these speakers, just both going, what? And these three older customers are behind us. And then they drank up, headed out, because again, they're obviously there largely because it's a local place to have coffee. And the rest of the time that we spent there was just like a kind of almost like a DJ set by the owner, where he just played his favorite George Adams tracks. And of course, and at the time, as I've said in the previous episode, I wasn't really that familiar with George Adams at all. And it was only when I sort of sat down, I started to put two and two together. I was like, okay, so this is obviously his guy. And then there was a huge picture of George Adams smiling on the wall. And he basically, the entire time we were there, he just played George Adams records. And then, of course, I went off the next couple of days on an absolute spree on Discogs and bought up a lot of the George Adams and Don Pullen catalogue. But I think for me, the reason I picked this one was, there was two reasons. I think one was just like the sheer, it was a classic example of just that sheer and pure dedication to one artist, dedication to what they're doing, just in this area, this gorgeous place. Now, there was all sorts of stories, which again are in the other episode, but, he talked about it had closed for a while and then he's reopened it, and et cetera, et cetera. But just this gorgeous space, beautifully maintained, and dedicated to this one artist, and probably a more obscure artist than what we're used to with places like Mingus and, Coltrane and Miles Davis and so on and so forth. And just to sit there and have this guy play these records so loudly in the speakers. And then, of course, the kind of highlight for me, which I've talked about like ad nauseum to some people, was when he said, like, would he hear this? Would he hear this? And of course, what happened was he switched over to the TV, and I immediately groaned, because I've got this thing about like TVs in spaces, but like everywhere you go now in the UK, in Ireland, and you go into a bar, there's always TV screens. So I was like, oh, come on. And then he put on, there was like a film, and like a Gene Hackman film came on, and we were like, oh, are they doing this sort of, I know what Americans will like. And
how about a little French Connection? It was my favorite movie back in the days, Yeah, like, oh, okay.
So then he switched on this video, and it was the Fuji Jazz Festival from 1987, and it was George Adams and Don Pullen live playing this song. It's Song from the Old Country, and it was so loud, and I had just never seen anything like it. Like Don Pullen in particular, the way he was playing the piano, we just sat there.
Out of control.
It was funny because he kind of, I know we also covered this, but he actually described it as my treasure. And obviously this was a video that he had lovingly recorded from the television, transferred to a digital format. Now, obviously nowadays, to the more digitally literate, most of those kind of things you can find somewhere online, on usually on YouTube, and actually it does exist on YouTube. But he was just so protective of it. I remember him saying, please don't film this, or don't photograph this, because it's sort of my treasure. But that track in itself just blew me away. And on top of this experience, sitting in this place with one side of one entire wall was just records and beautifully filed like jazz magazines, and then behind us this gorgeous bar and this incredible sound system. And I just thought, this is kind of like, this is it, right? It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter who you are. It's just, this man is like, this is what I love. This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my days. And he was just an absolute gentleman. He also then ushered us out. Not ushered us out, I should say. When we were leaving, he kind of took us to the door, and he sort of said goodbye and like waved us off and stuff like that. And it was just one of those places that sticks in my mind as being kind of like a complete and utter serendipity, because we hadn't necessarily had it on our list as a kind of a target or as a place that we must go there. But just taking that chance and sort of just doing that slight detour just paid off. And so for me, number 6, Adams, Coffee and Jazz. What a morning.
I mean, what can I say? An absolute gem, a stupendous pick. I had the same feeling about the TV when he pulled, I was like, wait, what is this going to be? Is this going to be putting on some USEN or something? You know what I mean? Or like we've seen a lot of guys play YouTube, when they're too lazy to change the record.
Yeah.
And I was like, that would be sounding great on his great sound system. But when he put that on, and I recognized it right away, because you recognize the 80s video, the clothing. And I have been a big fan of the Adams Pullen quartet, although you've certainly passed me in the amount of records you have now, because I think you were underselling that. You at least bought 7 or 8 over the next couple months. But yes, so I do have a lot more thoughts to give on Adams. So interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I did end up buying pretty much all the back catalogue. I think I've got most of the George Adams and Don Pullen stuff now. And if it's your bag, it's still pretty cheap compared to a lot of stuff. If you want to try and pick some of that stuff up, a lot of it released in Europe on things like Timeless Records and stuff like that. So you often find if you're in Germany, you don't see it so much here, but you're in Germany, Holland.
Well, they were a pretty steady working band, and they I think maybe their most famous live album in the States is one that I have. It's live at the Vanguard, Village Vanguard, but they were a working band and played a lot in Europe and recorded there. And obviously, like we saw with the video, Fuji Jazz brought them over, so they had a lot of fans in Japan, and I think they were together for. Well, George and Don were at least together for a decade, and I think Danny Richmond was with them for almost all of that. They might have had a couple bassists, but anyway, it was a working group. It wasn't just like a 1 or 2 time thing. So they did record a lot, but yeah, you don't see their albums everywhere. Maybe you do see it more in Europe. I'll have a look next time I'm browsing.
You do see them a lot in Japan actually as well, but I think just in the UK. I've just never really come across them, so I'm always surprised. But certainly in mainland Europe, you see them all the time. But that particular track that he played too, which is great, it's very, very catchy. It's a total earworm on the album. But that album itself is on Blue Note, so they achieved like a considerable level of sort of fame and exposure in terms of being on that label alone. But that particular version, that live version, is just mind blowing.
It's great, and that group is such a very particular type of late 70s New York group, where it was they've already taken and incorporated so much of the free jazz revolution, but they're not going farther, but they're just coming at it from a different direction. It's heavy, it's very heavy music at times, but it's not exactly that kind of dissonant, blaring free jazz. An absolutely amazing group and just an amazing place. And look, like I said,
he did love a song, which I wouldn't necessarily be completely on board with.
He did like to sing as well, which was sometimes not. That's parts that I would skip through. But again, let's emphasize, we had known nothing about it, and we didn't even know if it was going to be worth to go to. Like, we were just kind of like, well, it's kind of, what is it, 2 stations on the subway? I guess we can get it in and out in like 2 hours. Let's go do it. You know what I mean? That was like, I mean, what if we had not? I guess we wouldn't have known. It would have been one of those. Was it one of those Donald Rumsfeld unknown unknowns, so you don't know what you missed. But I agree with you completely. And as I said, I'll have a lot more to say coming up.
First time a Republican's been quoted on this podcast. Anyway, so that was number 6. Number 6 done. That means we're into the top 5 as we get closer to that number 1. And probably it's going to get harder to select. And like you say, there may be some more overlap as it gets to the sort of the real business end of the charts. But anyway, great choices again. Adams and Saramanian, 2 absolutely crucial joints if you're ever down in Kyushu. Not to be missed, and very different. One is clean, slick, beautifully maintained. One looks like a bomb went off inside, but they are both incredible places and not to be missed. And we'll pick this up again, James, next week for our number 5 episode. Until then.
That's right, next week.
Go do some numbers.
I'm off to watch the WBC, Japan versus South Korea, which many of our listeners may understand. Wee bit of a rivalry there between the 2 baseball teams. So the atmosphere should be intense, to say the least. So I've got a couple beers and ready to get my yakyu on.
Nice. Talk to you next week.
Talk to you soon, buddy. Bye-bye.
Bye.